What if your brain is working against you? This isn't just a theory meant to make you feel better about your struggles, it's a fundamental concept in neuroscience. For years, I believed that my lack of progress was a personal failing, a sign of weak character or insufficient willpower. I would set ambitious goals, feel a surge of motivation, and then, inevitably, watch it all crumble within weeks. It was a frustrating and demoralizing cycle. Quick note, I'm not a doctor or neuroscientist. What I'm sharing here is based on research and personal experience, and it's for educational purposes only. I couldn't understand why the gap between who I wanted to be and who I actually was felt like an impossible chasm to cross. The truth, I later discovered, was far more complex and far less about my inherent flaws. An invisible force was at play, one that was wired into my very biology. This force isn't malicious, it doesn't want you to fail. Instead, its primary objective is to keep you safe and to conserve energy. Your brain is a master of efficiency, and it achieves this efficiency by creating shortcuts or habits. Every action you've ever repeated, every thought you've ever entertained, has carved a neural pathway in your mind. These pathways become the default routes for your behavior. Deviating from them requires conscious effort, a commodity your brain prefers to spend sparingly. So, when you try to introduce a new habit, like waking up early or exercising daily, you are not just adding a new behavior, you are fighting against a deeply ingrained automated system that is designed to keep you exactly where you are. The resistance you feel is not a sign that you are broken, it is a sign that your brain is functioning exactly as it was designed to. It prefers the known over the unknown, the predictable over the uncertain. Change represents a threat to this stability. Your brain perceives your attempt to build a new life as a venture into dangerous, uncharted territory. It sounds the alarm bells in the form of procrastination, doubt, and that overwhelming feeling of "I just can't do it today." It's your internal safety mechanism working overtime, desperately trying to guide you back to the familiar comfort of your old patterns, even if those patterns are the very things holding you back from the success you crave. Understanding this biological reality was the first step toward reclaiming my power. It shifted my perspective from self-blame to strategic thinking. I was no longer fighting against myself, I was learning to work with my brain's operating system. The challenge wasn't about summoning more willpower or finding a magical burst of motivation that would last forever. Instead, it was about learning the rules of the game. It was about understanding how to make the desired changes so small, so easy, and so non-threatening that my brain's ancient defense systems would not even notice them being implemented. The goal was to sneak past the guards, not to storm the castle gates. For a long time, my life was a masterclass in procrastination and unfulfilled potential. I was the king of starting things and the champion of quitting early. Each January, I would write down a list of ambitious resolutions. I was going to write a book, get in the best shape of my life, and build a successful business. The initial excitement was palpable. I would buy new notebooks, download productivity apps, and tell everyone about my grand plans. But the momentum never lasted. The late nights spent working would soon turn into late nights scrolling through social media. The gym visits would become less frequent, replaced by the familiar comfort of the couch. Each failure felt like another piece of evidence confirming a deep-seated belief. I was simply not the kind of person who could achieve great things. My days were defined by a constant low-grade anxiety. I knew what I should be doing, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The simple act of opening a blank document to write felt like lifting an impossibly heavy weight. My brain would immediately offer 1,000 more appealing alternatives. "Just check your email first," it would whisper. "You should probably clean your desk before you start." These small delays would snowball, and before I knew it, the entire day was gone. I'd been busy, but I had accomplished nothing meaningful. This pattern left me feeling exhausted and defeated, trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage that I couldn't seem to break, no matter how hard I tried. The worst part was the internal narrative that accompanied this behavior. I told myself a story about who I was. I was a procrastinator. I was someone who lacked discipline. I was lazy. This identity became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because I believed I was a person who quit, I found it easy to quit. When things got difficult, my brain would say, "See, this is not for you, this is who you are." This internal confirmation felt perversely comforting. It absolved me of the responsibility to keep trying. It was easier to accept the identity of a failure than to endure the discomfort of pushing through the resistance required to become someone new. This struggle wasn't limited to big projects. It seeped into every corner of my life. I would put off making important phone calls, delay difficult conversations, and avoid any task that promised even a hint of discomfort. My environment reflected my internal state: a cluttered desk, a messy room, a calendar filled with good intentions but few actual accomplishments. I felt stuck. Not because of external circumstances, but because of a powerful internal force I didn't yet understand. I was living a life defined by the path of least resistance, and that path was leading me nowhere I wanted to go. It was a slow, quiet erosion of my own self-respect, one small, avoided task at a time. The breakthrough came when I stopped looking at my behavior as a moral failing and started looking at it through the lens of neuroscience. Your brain is not a passive observer of the world, it is an active prediction machine. A leading theory in neuroscience, known as predictive processing, suggests that your brain is constantly making guesses about what is going to happen next based on your past experiences. Its goal is to minimize surprise. When its predictions are correct, everything runs smoothly. But when you try to do something new, you create a prediction error. You are telling your brain that its model of you is wrong, and it does not like that one bit. This is the feeling of resistance. This predictive model extends to your own identity. Your brain has a deeply held concept of who you are, built from years of accumulated evidence, your thoughts, your actions, and your habits. Every time you procrastinate, you cast a vote for the identity of a procrastinator. Every time you quit, you reinforce the identity of a quitter. Your brain sees this identity not as a story, but as a fact. When you then try to act like a disciplined, productive person, your brain flags this as an inconsistency. It sees this new action as a threat to the stability of your known self. It's a form of cognitive dissonance that creates immense internal friction. This process is amplified by a powerful cognitive bias, confirmation bias. Your brain actively seeks out evidence that confirms its existing beliefs and ignores evidence that contradicts them. When it comes to your identity, this means your mind will highlight every instance that proves your old story right. If you believe you are bad with money, you will notice every unnecessary purchase you make, while conveniently forgetting the times you saved diligently. If you try to start a new workout routine but miss one day, your brain will scream, "I told you so, you're not a healthy person." This is the core of what feels like self-sabotage. It's your brain's confirmation bias working to protect your old identity. Therefore, changing your life is not just about changing your habits, it's about changing your identity. You cannot become a new person while clinging to the beliefs and predictions of your old self. The resistance you feel is your brain's attempt to resolve the conflict between your new actions and your old identity. It wants to pull you back to the person it knows, the person it can easily predict. The key then is not to fight this system with brute force, but to gently and systematically update its predictions. You must provide your brain with new evidence, slowly and consistently, until it has no choice but to build a new model of who you are. The single most powerful idea that unlocked my potential was this: every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. This concept reframed my entire approach to personal development. It was no longer about chasing a distant, monumental goal that seemed impossibly far away. It was about the present moment. It was about the single choice right in front of me. This simple reframe shifted my focus from outcomes to identity. The goal wasn't to write a book, it was to become a writer. The goal wasn't to run a marathon, it was to become a runner. And how do you become a writer? You write. One sentence, one paragraph. That is one vote. This idea liberated me from the all-or-nothing mindset that had held me captive for so long. Previously, I believed that I needed a huge burst of motivation to make a change. I thought I had to go from 0 to 100 overnight. When I inevitably failed to maintain that intensity, I would give up entirely. The every action is a vote philosophy taught me that small wins were not just minor achievements, they were crucial pieces of evidence I could present to my brain. A 2-minute workout was not a failure to do a 1-hour session, it was a successful vote for the identity of someone who exercises. Writing a single paragraph was not a failure to write a chapter, it was a successful vote for a writer. I started to see my days as a series of opportunities to cast these votes. Should I take the stairs or the elevator? Taking the stairs was a vote for being a healthy person. Should I read one page of a book or scroll on my phone? Reading one page was a vote for being a learner. These choices were so small, so minuscule that they flew under the radar of my brain's resistance. There was no major prediction error to trigger the alarms. I wasn't trying to become a new person overnight, I was just making one tiny choice that was slightly better than my previous default. It was a gentle, almost invisible nudge in the right direction. Slowly but surely, the evidence began to accumulate. The votes started to add up. My brain, the prediction machine, began to take notice. Its model of me started to shift. The story I told myself began to change, not because I was using affirmations or wishful thinking, but because I had tangible proof. I wasn't just saying I was a writer, I was pointing to the paragraph I wrote yesterday, and the day before that. I wasn't just hoping to be a healthy person, I had the proof from taking the stairs and doing my 2-minute workout. The new identity was no longer a distant dream. It was being built, vote by vote, action by action, in the real world. With this new understanding, I developed a practical blueprint for rewiring my brain. The first pillar was establishing identity anchors. These were incredibly small actions that served as undeniable proof of my desired identity. To become a writer, my identity anchor was to write 50 words every single day. Not a chapter, not a page, just 50 words. This was so easy it was almost laughable, which was precisely the point. It was impossible to say no to. This small, consistent act anchored the identity of writer in my daily reality. For fitness, it was putting on my running shoes and stepping outside for 1 minute. The action itself was less important than the consistency of casting the vote for that identity, day after day. The second pillar was redesigning my environment to make the right actions the easiest ones. I realized that willpower is a finite resource, but our environment shapes our behavior constantly. To make writing easier, I left a notebook and pen open on my desk every night. It was the first thing I saw in the morning, a visible cue prompting the desired action. To encourage reading, I placed a book on my pillow. To drink more water, I filled a large water bottle and placed it in the center of my workspace. Conversely, I made undesirable actions harder. I moved the television out of my bedroom and logged out of all social media apps on my phone, adding friction to those habits. The third pillar was to track my completions, not my streaks. The don't break the chain method can be powerful, but for me, it was brittle. Missing one day felt like a total failure and often led to me quitting altogether. Instead, I started tracking my total number of votes. I kept a simple journal where I'd mark an X every day I completed my identity anchor. If I missed a day, it was no big deal. The goal was simply to have more X's this month than last month. This approach fostered a mindset of progress over perfection. It allowed for the messiness of real life while still keeping my focus on the long-term accumulation of evidence for my new identity. Finally, the fourth pillar was the rule of finishing. I made a commitment to finish small things. Procrastination had trained my brain to be comfortable with open loops and unfinished tasks. To counteract this, I started by finishing tiny tasks immediately. If I took a plate to the kitchen, I washed it right away instead of leaving it in the sink. If I opened an email, I would answer it, delete it, or archive it on the spot. This practice, applied to small things, began to rebuild my brain's tolerance for completion. It trained the muscle of seeing things through to the end, which gradually transferred to my larger, more important projects. It was another way of proving to myself that I was the type of person who finishes what they start. My journey was not a solitary one. I stood on the shoulders of giants and used powerful tools to guide my way. Certain books provided the foundational knowledge that reshaped my entire worldview. My own work, Atomic Habits, was born from these struggles and lays out the system of 1% improvements. But I also drew immense wisdom from Brianna Wiest's The Mountain Is You, which brilliantly explains how self-sabotage is a misguided attempt at self-preservation. It helped me cultivate compassion for my own resistance. For a dose of raw, unfiltered discipline, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins was a stark reminder of the untapped potential that lies on the other side of discomfort. These books became my manual for understanding the human mind. Beyond books, podcasts became my university on the go. The Huberman Lab podcast, hosted by neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, was an absolute game changer. He provides science-backed protocols for everything from focus and motivation to sleep and learning. His episodes taught me about the role of dopamine and how to manage its cycles to sustain effort over the long term, rather than burning out. Another staple was the Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Williamson, which distills insights from world-class thinkers on how to live a better life. Listening to these conversations changed my inputs, flooding my brain with positive, actionable ideas instead of the usual digital noise. I also leveraged technology to support my new systems. While many apps can be distracting, I found a few that genuinely helped. I used an app called Be Freed to block distracting websites and apps during my focused work blocks, creating an environment conducive to deep work. For tracking my identity anchors, I didn't need anything complex. A simple habit tracker or even the Notes app on my phone was sufficient. The key was to make the process of tracking as frictionless as possible. The tool itself is less important than the consistency of its use. The goal is to have a simple, reliable system for collecting the votes for your new identity. These resources worked in concert. The books provided the why, the deep understanding of the principles at play. The podcasts provided the how, the specific science-backed tactics I could implement immediately. And the technology helped me execute, creating the structure and reducing the friction needed to follow through on my intentions. This toolkit was essential. It's one thing to decide you want to change, but it's another to have a map and a compass to guide you through the dense forest of your old habits and beliefs. These resources were my map and compass, illuminating the path forward when my own motivation flickered. The person you want to be is not someone you will magically become one day in the future. That person is built. It is built through small, deliberate choices made every single day. For years, I waited for a lightning bolt of motivation to strike me, to transform me into the disciplined, productive person I dreamed of being. But that lightning bolt never came. The transformation happened quietly, in the background, fueled not by grand gestures, but by thousands of tiny, almost imperceptible actions. It was the decision to write one sentence, to do one push-up, to read one page. Each action was a single brick, and over time I built a new house, a new identity. Your brain is not your enemy. It is a logical, powerful machine that is simply running on an outdated program. It is operating based on the evidence you have given it so far. If you want to change the output, you must change the input. You must start feeding it new evidence. You have the power to do this, starting right now. You don't need to overhaul your entire life tomorrow. You just need to win the next vote. The next choice you make is an opportunity to prove a new story to yourself. It's a chance to cast a vote for your future identity. Don't focus on the mountain of change in front of you. That view is overwhelming and will trigger your brain's threat detection system, leading to procrastination. Instead, focus only on the very next step. What is the smallest possible action you can take that moves you toward the person you want to become? Can you put your running shoes by the door? Can you open a document and write a single title? Can you put one apple in your bag for work tomorrow? Make the proof so small that you cannot fail. Let your brain see that this new behavior is not scary, not difficult, and not a threat to its stability. This is how real, lasting change occurs. It is not an event, it is a process. It is a slow, steady accumulation of proof. Your identity is not fixed at birth, it is malleable. You can rewrite your story. You can become a writer, an athlete, an artist, or a leader. You do it by acting like one, in the smallest possible way, over and over again. Watch as your brain catches up. Watch as the resistance fades. Watch as the new identity becomes your default. It all begins with one small, decisive action. Cast your first vote today. You've just completed a deep dive into rewiring your brain. If this helped you see the steps clearly, hit like and subscribe so we can keep building smarter habits together.